Hi everyone. I wanted to comment further on the religions in China, that being Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. I've already asked the class to do some reading and also to look at some other videos for background on this material. But I did want to uh, look at it from a few specific angles, so I thought I would make this little uh, video to do so. Houston Smith refers to these three religious teachings, Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, as the great religion in China, and argues that Chinese don't feel a need to choose one to the exclusion of the others because each of them has its usefulness in the life of human beings. So all three of them can be embraced simultaneously, although you might appeal to one or the other for uh, different situations.
Our primary purpose in this video is to provide an introduction to Confucianism and Taoism. Uh, and I think for this purpose, one of the things that we have to be aware of is the importance of this symbol, the Yin Yang symbol, which I've put up a copy of it here. This is a dynamic or represents a kind of dynamic relationship between opposites. When I say dynamic, I mean if they're both of these sides, you have to imagine them in constant motion, kind of whirling around each other. Two opposing forces in the natural and the human world. And in each of them, there's a little bit of the opposite, a white dot in the black side and a black dot in the white side. These will help us, I think, understand uh, the essence of both Confucianism and Taoism, I think, and in what respect they're really different from each other. In China, yin and yang values are constantly lurking in the background. And this is especially the case in Confucianism and also in Taoism. Probably more so in Taoism, we'll find it, but in Confucius also recognized the yin yang as an important principle. Interpretations, like what's yin and what's yang, there's a list here that we could talk about a little bit. So we say yin is usually on this side kind of represents receptivity, and you could say yang is activity. Just for instance, maybe yin is moon, yang would be the sun, yin would be negative, and yang would be positive. You could, and so on, cold and warm, dark and light, soft and hard. And finally, female and male. Maybe the gender identifications here might turn some people off a bit. I mean, but this is a traditional way of thinking about gender in China, I would say. And it's, I wouldn't want to overdo the gender aspect of it. There's one of the ways that the difference between yin and yang is described as kind of like a hillside that the sun is shining on. You'd say at one time of the day, certain parts of the hill are uh, illuminated, are bright, and other parts are in shade. And then as the day goes on, that changes, and then what was in shade becomes illuminated. And what was bright becomes shadowy and so forth. So that yin yang kind of refers to uh, those two sides of what's going on in nature. It's a kind of dualism. The whole idea of the yin yang is a kind of dualistic vision of the natural world, not just the natural world, the human world too. If we think about this symbol a little bit and try to analyze it, we might come to some interesting conclusions. I've already used the word dynamic in my description of it, and I think that's the first thing that we have to note, that this the symbol itself is static, but what it represents is something which is dynamic, something which is always in motion. And what is it? There's two opposing forces that are depicted, which are constantly interacting with each other. Uh, Forces that, in a sense, are complements of each other, that together, each of the pairs makes a kind of whole. And you can't really understand one without understanding the other. So there's a kind of balance which is maintained. And we say that the relationship is one of interdependence. Again, you can't have one without having the other. So uh, they, they help us know both of them in order to understand either of them. Part of the consequence of the dynamic aspect of it is that there the symbol or what it represents is constantly changing. I mean, the only thing which is constant about the symbol is the fact that it's change itself, that reality is constantly undergoing change. You say reality is fluid. In order for us to understand it, we have to be able to accept that that's the case about it and try to, be with it instead of trying to stop the change exactly. And then you could say that reality, the other thing that's interesting is that even though we're talking about two opposing forces uh, constantly altering their relationship with one another, I mean, the symbol as a whole indicates a kind of unified whole. Is reality is one thing, even though it has a complex composition, that ultimately there's a kind of balance between what's going on inside and a kind of unity to the whole, which is made up of that play. The sixth point I have here, I think, is particularly interesting, striking about the symbol, and is that you say everything contains a bit of its own opposite. We said there's a black dot in the white domain and a white dot in the black domain. So it's never quite so simple. It's not like a hard and fast division between the two sides. There's always it's not so easy sometimes to think about like what the different how to understand the two opposites. You say that in the dark there's always some little light, and in the light there's always something dark, or in what we take to be good there's a little bit which is bad, and vice versa. So reality is complex that way. And I think finally, the idea that existence itself really comes from this pairing off, or this division between two pairs. You could say, kind of like in procreation, that's where we all come from, is from the blending of two opposite forces. So let's see what it looks like if we try to apply it into some of the philosophies here.
Now, Smith, when he talks about these two religions, or maybe philosophies is a better term, but he suggests that it's not right to think of them as being divided against one another, as if they were separate, opposed religions. And that's the point where he introduces the concept of the great religion of China, which he says the great religion includes Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. Uh, that doesn't mean that they're not different. I mean, because fundamentally, Confucianism and Taoism, in particular, are fundamentally sort of opposed to each other in terms of their basic approach to things. And so I think it's useful or interesting to look at those two uh, religions, philosophies, ethical teachings, however we want to characterize them, in terms of yin and yang. So we're going to say, I mean, this isn't unique to myself. I mean, others have noted this as well, that Confucianism looks like a yang teaching, or a teaching that emphasizes the yang, and Taoism looks very much like a philosophy that celebrates the yin. Two very different philosophies. It's pretty basic, but we can say that Confucianism is derived from the teachings of Confucius, and that the primary source for this teaching for us is a book that either he wrote or his followers wrote down about what his teaching was, called the Analects. In general, I think we can say that Confucianism has a strong emphasis on human effort and human excellence. Clearly, there is a movement away from an emphasis on heaven. Traditionally, Chinese religion consisted of ancestor worship, and Confucius doesn't deny the existence of heaven as the abode, as the place where our ancestors go and where they continue some kind of existence. And he doesn't deny that we should be paying our respects to our ancestors in a way. So ancestor worship can continue. But what he does change is the emphasis between which is more important, heaven or the earthly plane. And traditionally it was thought that heaven was the more important realm, and therefore it demanded a lot of our attention in terms of rituals and sacrifices, and you know, paying attention to it, and that earthly concerns weren't as important. But for Confucius, he reverses this, and he doesn't deny that we should spend some time paying attention to heaven and doing things to show respect for our ancestors. But for him, the most important thing is how we behave in the world that we live in. So you could say Confucianism is kind of a humanism. It doesn't negate religion, but it sort of gives it a kind of secondary status. In terms of uh, how we think about what it means to be a human being, Confucianists have a very positive view of what a human being is and what a human being can become. So humans are viewed as beings that can work to perfect themselves, and they kind of have an, an obligation to develop themselves, all of us, to the highest extent possible. That it's kind of duty to strive to become a superior man or woman, to become a sage on the level of an individual. So from a Confucianist point of view, you you should try to be all that you can be, to borrow a well-used metaphor. The other thing is, although you should be concerned with yourself and your own development and your own inner growth, I mean, you should also pay attention to others. So you could say we have obligations towards ourselves. We also have obligations with respect to others. And the aim is to make life better, not just for myself, but to make life better for everyone around me, both uh, those close to me and those that I associate with within in society, and as much as possible to make the state better as well. There's this principle of reciprocity, and as an aspect of the way everything is interconnected, everything has some effect on everything else. And it's an interesting principle that you need to be trying to grow as an individual, but your growth as an individual depends to a large extent on your interactions with others as well. So the more you grow as an individual, the more you see and appreciate the ways in which you're interconnected with everyone else. So by trying to make other people better, you enhance your own growth. So we could conclude about Confucianism, and these are very general comments again, but the Confucianist is really somebody who believes in making things better, and that we should do what we can to make the world a better place to live in, and that this is something that we're capable of accomplishing, and through kind of direct action of some sort, through a kind of human doing. So you could say we have these little list of obligations. You make yourself better, make others around you better, and hence make society and even the state better. And I think Confucius would probably also want to add that you make the world better as a result of moving, doing what you can in these directions. So the overall belief is that human beings are capable of this, of working in this direction and with positive results, and that they are capable of making the world better, and even maybe making the Tao better, or making nature better as a result. Now, this is a brief summation of Taoism, but I just wanted to emphasize that if Confucianism represents Yang values, this sort of active doing, uh, trying to make everything better in a way. Taoism has a very different approach to things. Taoists uh, were a little less optimistic about human beings being capable of doing things to make the world a better place, and felt that we would be better served if we allowed nature to make whatever changes need to be made in the way we do things. The Taoists didn't believe that we were really capable of understanding the ultimate truth of nature or the world, and that the end result would be that we would be trying to change things for the better, but our uh, knowledge was inadequate, so the result would be just as good a chance of making things worse than it would be of making them better. So the Taoist he's not opposed to making things better, but he has a different way of thinking about it or working towards it. It's more of a kind of indirect way of doing things. So you kind of get out of the way and let nature sort of lead you instead of you trying to lead nature or to make nature be something that it's not. So, sort of an indirect approach. Uh, the emphasis in Taoism, instead of doing and being active and so forth, was kind of a passive one, but it didn't mean not doing anything. It just meant more in the sense of being open. I mean, you're being active, you're going out, and it's more from a closed point of view. And the Taoists are recommending you try to be receptive, to others and to the world. Let it be what it is. Be open to it, and when you try to be active and doing things, it makes it hard to be open and sort of receptive at the same time. So again, this, allowing change to take place, directed not from within yourself so much, but from like another source, the source of nature. I don't know. You could try to make a parallel between some religious teachings like Christianity, where you want to let God into your life and let God sort of make your decisions for you, with the Holy Spirit or something like that. Where if you have too much emphasis on your own capacity and trust in that, to make things better, you're probably going to screw things up. So it'd be better sort of to allow some other force to come into you and sort of direct your action that way. So I think that's kind of what Taoism is about. And it's kind of a hint at I think the difference between Confucianism and Taoism. Confucianism really is a Yang philosophy. I'm going to say Taoism corresponds more with the Yin values and gives them a positive place in the world.